Hi, I'm Abby from Ratings.com. Today, we're reviewing the TCL QM8.
Wait, did we already review the QM8? The one with the crack in the screen?
Yes, but this is the QM851G, and that was the QM850G.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Totally different.
Okay, cool.
All right. Hi, I'm Abby from Ratings.com. Today, we're reviewing the TCL QM851G, or, if you prefer, the 2024 TCL QM8. Last year's model, the QM850G, is totally different. It's totally different. Got that? Perfect. So, how does this year's model compare to the TCL QM8? I mean, last year's TCL QM8. Listen, I know you're confused, but stay tuned. You're about to find out if the newer model is worth the purchase over last year's model. And if you know anything about TCL's QM8 series, any of them, it's that these TVs are extremely bright. So, grab your sunglasses and let's dive in. We bought and tested the 65-inch TCL QM851G, and these results are also valid for the 75, 85, and 98-inch models. The larger models perform similarly, although they should have better dark scene performance than the 65-inch model due to having more local dimming zones. For our European friends, the TCL QM851G is currently only available in North America. In Europe, TCL released the similar TCL X955. Typically, similar models from other regions perform differently, so these results aren't valid for that one. The new QM8 has a very similar design to last year's model, at least from the front. Look at them. Notice the difference? There aren't many. If you look closely enough, you'll notice the thinner gray plastic border on the newer model. It also has branding near the top right corner with reflective writing, which is an interesting choice. The bezels also have a reflective finish, so if you're sensitive to reflections, all of this could perhaps annoy you when using the TV in a bright room. One thing that's back from last year's model is the center-mounted stand. It's compact and doesn't require a large table to place the TV on. It lifts the screen about 3.5 inches from the table, which is easy enough for most soundbars to fit in front of the screen without blocking it. As with most center-mounted stands, the TV wobbles a little when pushed, but it quickly settles. Pretty typical stuff. From the back, the newer QM8 does look different from the older model, but in design only. All the ports are situated in about the same spot on the right side of the TV, if you look at it from the front, and they're recessed within the back panel, making them hard to reach when you wall mount the TV. Design-wise, the newer model looks different than last year's model, as TCL opted for a checkerboard pattern, quite like the most recent Sony TVs. There are two speakers at the top and an Onkyo subwoofer located in the middle. Time to talk inputs. After all, what use is a TV if you can't plug anything into it, am I right? The newer QM8 is peculiar here. It has two HDMI 2.1 ports, but only one is capable of 4K at 144 Hz or 1080p at 240 Hz. The second HDMI 2.1 port caps out at 4K at 120 Hz. It has two other HDMI 2.0 ports, one of which is the TV's eARC port. We just love it when you don't lose an HDMI 2.1 port to the eARC. The eARC port supports all major audio formats, including those from DTS, so you won't have to worry about compatibility with external sources. Aside from that, the TV has an ATSC 3.0 tuner, so you can watch over-the-air channels in 4K. It has two USB 2.0 ports on the back near the HDMI inputs, but it also has a lone USB 3.0 port on the right side of the TV when looking at it from the front. Unusual, but welcome. There's a digital optical audio out port, a 3.5mm jack for your headphones or other audio devices, and an Ethernet port. There's also a composite in port, but that requires an adapter that isn't included in the box. Finally, this TV comes with Wi-Fi 6E, with full support for the 6 GHz band. We've mentioned the TV's speakers and Onkyo subwoofer, so the QM8 must be amazing for sound, right? Well, the good news is that it produces a bit of bass thanks to that subwoofer. That is nice, as TV speakers rarely produce any bass. But it's nowhere near as good as if you had a dedicated soundbar, so you won't be throwing EDM parties with this TV's speakers anytime soon. The TV's sound profile is balanced enough that dialogue is easy to understand, but it doesn't sound nearly as good at the TV's max volume. There's also quite a bit of distortion at max volume, and the TV doesn't get very loud, so you might have to crank up the volume at times. Overall, this TV's sound is alright, but it's nothing to write home about. Alright, enough chit-chat. Let's get down to business. Let's talk about image quality, starting with contrast, which is outstanding on the QM8. It has a great native contrast ratio in case you want to disable the TV's local dimming for some reason, but don't. With local dimming enabled, this TV just sings. It displays deep blacks that stay deep when brighter highlights are also on the screen. Still, as fantastic as the TV's contrast is, most of the QM8's direct competitors have better contrast. What they don't have, however, is the QM8's excellent blooming and lighting zone transitions. Its blooming performance is excellent. There's some minor blooming around bright objects and subtitles when displayed against a black background, but that's pretty much it. And its lighting zone transitions, also excellent. The leading edge of quick-moving objects is a bit dimmer, but there's barely any haloing. Outside of the pricey Sony Bravia 9, this is about as good as it gets on an LED TV. Okay, so the TV's contrast is outstanding, yet not quite as good as its competitors. That's okay, because its competitors can't match the QM8's ridiculously high HDR brightness. Look at these numbers. What is this? Did they put the sun in this TV? At the time of this review, it's the brightest TV we have ever tested, at least in HDR. There's no doubt that all HDR content absolutely pops on this TV. Bright highlights pop even when they're shown on otherwise extremely bright scenes. The TV also supports both HDR10+ and Dolby Vision. So overall, no matter the source, you're going to get the best HDR image quality possible. This brightness does come at the cost of accuracy in HDR content, however. It's okay, but clearly it favors brightness as all content is displayed brighter than intended by the content creator. There's a sharp cutoff near the TV's peak brightness with content mastered at 600 and 1000 nits, but that's fine as the TV is bright enough to fully display content mastered at those levels. There's a slight roll-off to maintain some detail in very bright specular highlights with content mastered at 4000 nits. At least the TV is colorful, if not accurate. Its HDR color gamut is very wide. It has fantastic coverage of the DCI-P3 color space, even if most colors are a bit undersaturated. Colors are also undersaturated in the wider Rec 2020 color space, with highly saturated greens and cyans performing the worst. But overall, the TV still has very good coverage of that space. It also has outstanding color volume, which isn't surprising considering how bright it is. It can display an incredibly wide range of colors at high luminance levels, and it's also capable of displaying dark saturated colors well, due to its outstanding contrast. You watch a ton of SDR content? Well, the QM8 delivers here too, as it's superbly bright in SDR. It will easily overcome glare in the brightest of rooms, especially with its fantastic reflection handling. Yeah, this TV isn't just bright, it handles lights like a champ. There is, however, some noticeable rainbow smearing, which can annoy some people. But there is no doubt that this TV is an absolute unit in any bright room scenario. Put this TV in a very bright room and it'll end up being the brightest thing in there by far. The QM8 is more accurate in SDR than in HDR. Its color temperature is pretty close to our target of 6500 Kelvin when set to the warm 5 color setting, and its color accuracy is great, with only some inaccuracies with light yellows, light cyans, and whites. The TV's biggest weakness is its white balance. It's decent, but blues are overrepresented in darker shades of gray, and reds are overrepresented in all shades of gray. When it comes to gamma, all scenes are displayed brighter than they should be. We're nitpicking a little bit as this TV is still very accurate, but there's room to grow for those of you inclined to have this TV calibrated. Viewing angle. TCL TVs haven't had the best viewing angle these past few years, and this TV is no different. Unless you're a fan of gamma shifting, brightness loss, and color washout, we suggest you sit right in front of the TV for the best visual quality possible. It isn't the best TV for wide seating arrangements. Image processing really wasn't one of TCL's strengths last year, although they gradually improved it through firmware updates. But this year, what is this? Good image processing out of the box? Really? Yes, really. Its upscaling does a good job with low-resolution content like DVDs, standard definition cable channels, and lower-resolution streams. Details are clear enough, even if some finer details and small hard-coded text can be hard to make out. And if you watch low-quality content from streaming apps, this TV has you covered with its great low-quality content smoothing. It smooths out most of the compression artifacts and low bitrate content. It does lose some fine detail in the process, but it's impressive overall. The QM8 also has very good HDR Native Gradient handling. This is good for watching HDR content with scenes and content that have shades of similar colors, just as long as the content doesn't have 50 shades of gray, as this TV has noticeable banding in all grays. Just stick to more colorful movies and you'll be fine. Finally, if you're worried about Judder, don't be. The TV automatically removes Judder from all sources when watching movies or shows that are in 24p, even if they're in a 60Hz signal, like from a cable box. In game mode, this TV doesn't lose any of its brightness, so your games will look just as fabulous in game mode as they would in other picture modes. Highlights really pop out during darker moments in games, and it's bright enough that even very bright specular highlights stand out in well-lit games. This is great, as the TV's input lag is way too high outside of game mode. In game mode, with the TV's Game Master feature turned on, the input lag is incredibly low as 5 milliseconds in 4K at 144 Hz. Strangely, the TV's input lag is higher in the TV's 1080p at 240 Hz mode, sitting at 8 milliseconds. Now, that's still super fast, but usually a higher refresh rate means a lower input lag, not higher. We did encounter a bug where we weren't getting low input lag while in game mode. To fix it, you have to power cycle the TV. It's an annoying bug, as you might not immediately notice that your input lag isn't what it should be. So stay alert, and if you feel like something's off, it probably is. The TV supports all three types of VRR, namely FreeSync, G-Sync, and HDMI Forum VRR. Its VRR range caps out at 120 Hz, 144 Hz, or 240 Hz, depending on the resolution and the HDMI port used. Unfortunately, just like last year's QM8, this year's model still has different overdrive settings based on the refresh rate. Here, the cutoff seems to be 65 Hz. Thus, when your frame rate fluctuates around 65 Hz, you'll get noticeable overshooting and other visual anomalies, as the TV's overdrive settings quickly swap back and forth as the refresh rate fluctuates. And again, there's a bug. Sometimes when the TV says that VRR is on, it isn't, leading to noticeable screen tearing. This one is more noticeable than the input lag bug, so make sure to power cycle your TV if that happens to you. Outside of the TV's overdrive behavior, its response time is excellent overall. There's minimal blur behind fast-moving objects, leading to a very pleasant gaming experience. Like most LED TVs, it's slower when coming out of dark states, leading to some black smearing and dark scene transitions. But overall, it's very fast. Now, this brings us to the main question. Should you buy this TV? It's a tricky question, actually. Like last year, the QM8's primary competitor this year is the Hisense U8 series, in this case, the U8N. And while both TVs are extremely close, for most content, we slightly prefer the U8N due to its superior contrast and better PQ EOTF tracking. The QM8 is a bit brighter than the U8N overall, but the U8N has slightly better reflection handling, giving them very similar bright room performance. The QM8 does have better blooming and lighting zone transitions, so it's extremely close, with the slightest of edges to the Hisense. The QM8 automatically removes Judder from all sources, while the U8N doesn't remove 24p Judder from 60Hz sources. So if you use a cable box or an older streaming device without a match frame rate feature and you care about Judder, then the QM8 is the better choice. Gamers, however, might want to more seriously consider the QM8. The U8N loses a bit of its brightness in game mode. Not much, but it's there. The QM8 doesn't. As the QM8 is already the brightest TV of the two, it ends up noticeably brighter than the U8N in game mode. Not by much, but it's noticeable. Of course, the Hisense still has the better contrast, although the better lighting zone transitions of the QM8 come in clutch in games where bright highlights are moving rapidly across the screen. Frankly, this is likely the tightest comparison we've ever done, and really, just get the cheapest of the two. It's too bad that the QM8 has only one 4K at 144 Hz HDMI port, as the U8N has two, although the U8N's 1080p at 240 Hz mode doesn't work correctly with VRR enabled. But how many of you have two high-performance gaming PCs connected to the same TV anyway? Now, what about if you stumble on last year's QM8 or QM850G for a cheaper price than this year's model? Well, go for it. The newer QM8 is better in every way, but not by much. Last year's QM8 improved gradually over the year, and now it's a truly great TV thanks to firmware updates. It's bright, it has outstanding contrast, and its image processing is almost as good as the newer models. The big problem with last year's QM8 is its refresh rate performance. Yes, the overdrive thing again. Unlike this year's QM8 or U8N, last year's TCL had multiple points where the overdrive settings shifted. This, frankly, made VRR almost unusable on that TV. Any gamer who wishes to use VRR should strongly consider getting the newer QM8 instead. Otherwise, last year's model is going to be a great buy at a great price. Well, that's all for our review of the TCL QM851G, or the 2024 version. If you want a more detailed write-up on the TV, check out our written review. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Abby from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. If you like what we do here and want to be a part of it, good news! We're hiring! We're currently looking for a display specialist that loves TV tech just as much as we do. If you're interested in learning more or seeing what other positions are open, follow the link to our careers page in the description below.